Hello everyone. So today's session we're gonna be talking about a very interesting topic and a very crucial uh, role that an RPA plays, and it's very important that we are aware of various documentations that an RPA business analyst generally deals with. So this is the seventh session, and today we are going to talk about prepare RPA. Is the module where we're going to see certain factors of benefits, how what are the certain thumb rules we will reiterate from the previous session, and then we will talk about the exception handling part, and we will continue with the PDD and the SDD, and we will do a thorough analysis of each of these documents to try and understand that how as a business analyst we are required to create a PDD, which is stands for process definition document. SDD is something which typically the business analyst does not create. It's actually done by the technical team, but still we will have a quick walkover to understand the components and the attributes in an SDD as well. All right, so let's get started. So to start off, we'll just reiterate certain important factors that we would have discussed earlier as well. And we will still try to understand one more time here that if I have to decide a process is RPA potential or not, right? So what would be the four thumb rules or the factors that drives my automation potentiality, right? So yesterday's session we spoke about, or in the previous session we spoke about certain automation potential quadrants, right? Where we did understand that if I have to draw and place all the processes into a mathematical quadrant, we can have something called as no automation possible, where we cannot automate anything. Then something we spoke about by semi-automation, right, where we can automate 50 to 60% of the process. Then we spoke about touchless, where I can automate all the steps of a process without an intervention. And then we spoke about 100% automation, but associated with a high cost. That means the solution of the RPA deployment would require some additional money or in terms of investment, but that automation can easily become a 100% automation, right? So with that, we will now try to understand that what could be the basic rules, that we would see. So first of all, the basic thumb rule that we have already understood is that any process needs to be rule based. Unless and until we have certain defined rules of how my process is flowing from step 1 to step 2, right, and then step 2 to the subsequent, I cannot be guaranteeing that an automation would fit in there. So rule based is the first thumb rule. Okay, second would be process type. The process needs to be mostly static and standard. Okay, static and standard. I cannot automate a process that starts changing, let's say every 3 months down the line, right? So such processes, we cannot say that those are automation potential, correct? The third one could be standard input. Yesterday we did a deep dive into the complexity analysis part, where we understood that standard input becomes a very, very important factor in order to decide majority of the process whether it is automation potential or not. So standardization is very, very important. Process expected to change. So in such cases, we would say that process that generally is expected to have a change request, correct? So certain processes, do not remain static for a longer period of time. Let's say there is a process which is constant, but 6 months down the line, let's say it might change. So any process that is expected to change can sometimes be also considered, but we have to evaluate it and we have to see the impact. And let's say for time being, we might can go for an automation, but let's say once the process is changing 6 months or 7 months down the line, which is a stable time frame, we can do an enhancement or modification of the robot using a change request. What do we call it as a CR? Now all these comprises to one single thing that we should understand is certain one concept called as unknown exception percentage. Now, what is an exception or what is an unknown exception that we will try to understand now? Correct. So let's see. So first of all, let's try to understand what is an exception. Correct. So an exception is generally anything that goes beyond what is defined. So the entire process is called as exception handling, which is defined by the exceptions that are unassisted by an automation, or let's say that was not evaluated as a part of the automation. So that's what we call it as exceptions. There are multiple definitions across RPA. So we also say that, so we can say that broadly, exceptions can be categorized into two types. One is business exception and another is system or application exception. It is known as, in two different names. So let's understand what is business exception, right? So business exception is something. So exception handling is actually a very, very critical process and a task for any automation journey. And we need to effectively do an exception analysis when we are doing the opportunity assessment. Now, the part of BA's role mostly ties up with this one, what we call it as business exception. So BA gets deeply associated with it to analyze all the possible business exceptions that might occur. Application or system exceptions are generally dealt by the technical team, because a business analyst might not be aware of all the technical nuances. So the tech team is accountable to define all the system exception, whereas the BA is accountable to work with the corresponding RPA stakeholder or the client to get all the exceptions defined. All right. So now let's understand what is a business exception in RPA. So now let's say we are talking about a specific RPA process. Okay. We are talking about a specific RPA project where I am analyzing a process. Let's say I need to create an automation for a reporting process, right? So let's say I have to download a file. Okay, I have to download a file. I have to check if the data exists in that file. If the data exists, let's say I'm going to do a data cleaning, and then I'm going to prepare the final report, and this report is going to be emailed to all the stakeholders. Okay, I'm going to send out an email. Now this is the set of process. Now at every step an exception can happen from a business standpoint, right? Now let's say, what if the downloaded file does not contain any data that I need? That's a scenario, right? So when we are doing this work manually, let's say every day I download the file and there are some chances that some data are missing. So if the data are missing, what we do, we as a resource or as a human being, we might go to different location or any other secondary or tertiary location where I can find similar information. I can copy that and put it in this file, and I can start with my process and move ahead. But when I talk about flow, an automation flow will not be able to or will be completely unaware of what to do if the data in the file is missing, unless and until we define it, we program it, and we deploy it. Those exceptions that comes in any natural scenario of a process cannot be handled by an RPA robot. So business exceptions are nothing but an error that might occur in the data or as a part of the process, which makes it missing or incomplete. All right. So anything that is related to the process and any deviation to my normal process flow is what we call it as business exception. So similarly, if I'm not getting the file, or I have the file but the data is missing, that's a business exception, because without the data I cannot do the data cleaning, so my report will not be developed, so I cannot send an email. So if you see the hierarchy, my remaining three activities are not getting completed because I have a hard stop here. All right. So now let's say even the file is having the data, I have done the data cleaning, Now for creating the report, and after sending, while creating the report, I see that the cleaning of the data was not done properly. That means whatever was required for the report publishing, some information are missing. So again, there is a disruption to my process flow, because report whatever was required from the previous step was not sent or done properly. So as a human, I can go and rectify my report. I can do the data cleaning properly, create all the parameters and publish the report. But an RPA bot, unless and until defined, programmed, and deployed that this kind of an exception can occur, and if you do not find the report, you need to come back to the previous step, do the data cleaning properly, and do a validation check, and once it is ready, go back to the next step. So such kind of a programming I need to do and embed it into my RPA robot, so that it is aware of such kind of scenario, and whenever there is a disruption to the normal process flow, my RPA bot is able to pick it up. So whenever we analyze a process, we need to remember that there can be n number of business exceptions. Okay, there could be n number of system exceptions. So effective deployment is one. So let's say if you have to reduce the number of errors after your process is RPA bot is deployed into production. Okay, what you need to do is, the more you catch the business exception from the beginning and make it as a part of your solution design, there is a very less chance that only for a business rule deviation the bot will fail. The bot might can still fail because of a system exception or an application issue, but not for a business exception. Because business exception is what is in the hand of a business analyst to understand all the ifs and else's, to understand all the pros and cons of the system, all the of the process, and how what needs to be done if something happens or a disruption happens to the normal process flow. Correct? So let's say to send out this email, I need this report file to be attached. Now let's say, what if this file was not ready, this report file was not ready because of some error. That means my mail cannot be distributed to the concerned recipients because the report is not ready. So what it has to do, probably in such cases, the bot should be notifying the business owner with a notification email that today's reporting automation has failed because the report file is not available. So unless and until we design these kind of exception handling, the what will happen if the report is not there, the email will not go, the bot will stop the execution. But the business will not know that what exactly has happened. Why did the email not go from my system? Correct? It would be causing a disruption to the project or even to the deliverables or the operations. Correct? So exception handling is very, very important, both from a business standpoint and also from a application standpoint. Now, what is system exception? System exceptions involves any disruption to the application services or screens or any other server or any other application that is involved. Now let's say in the same process where I'm sending out an email using an Outlook. Okay, let's say I'm using Microsoft Outlook in my process to send out a mail. Now what if one fine day the Outlook server for my organization has gone down? It is not there. Or let's say for some reason the Outlook application is not opening. Or let's say there is a latency for Outlook to respond. See, all these scenarios, the latency, the application not opening, the server is down, are all potential application or system exception that might be there in my automation. And I need, as a experienced technical architect or an RP architect, I should be defining all the possible system exception in my design, and all these exceptions need to be handled so that if there is any fine day the Outlook is not opening first time when the bot is trying, what it should do, let's say it should wait for 10 seconds. If it is not getting opened, let's say it does a reattempt. After 10 seconds, it will do a second attempt. Okay. let's say even after second attempt the application is not opening, it's going to wait for more 10 seconds and again attempt for third time to open the Outlook application, and let's say even the third time it has failed. So that means there is a genuine problem. So what we have to do in such cases, the bot will try to reattempt. What we do as a human, let's say we are trying to log into a Facebook, right? Sometimes we give a password, user ID, something is wrong, it doesn't work. We try again, right? Or if let's say again I've given a wrong password, I'll give it again. Or I'll give my username again. What we do there here manually, we do a reattempt to complete our login task. So similarly here, a bot also needs to be programmed that in case of any error where the application is not opening on any fine day, you are catching an error. To that error, how do you respond? You respond by reattempting once, reattempting thrice, twice, reattempting thrice. After that, even it is not opening, that means genuinely there's a problem. So the bot cannot just go and infinitely try reattempting, right? Does not make sense. So after, let's say, the third attempt, we would notify the business team that, hey, Outlook application is down, unable to send mail. So what will happen? Business owners will be aware that, you know what, there's an issue. That's why the bot is not working today. So they might find an alternative, or let's say any other different application or any other server to do the process manually. So always when there is an automation done, there could be an exception which might disrupt the automation, that might disrupt the service that the bot is providing. So those services need to be then done manually unless the services are restored back, right? So this is what we call it as system exception. Now let's try to understand that what are the different types of exceptions. One is checked exception. Checked exception means I know that every day 10 a.m. Central Time, I receive the report file in my email. Okay, there's a file that comes to me daily at 10 a.m. Central Time, but what happens? At times, I do not get the file. It is a known fact. So if I do not get the file, I try to reach out to the stakeholder and ask them to send me the file. So when we know that there is a process, but there is also a similar exception, and it is a known exception that, in a month, let's say there are 6 to 7 days where I don't automatically receive the file. I need to reach out to the stakeholder or remind the stakeholder to send me the file. Correct. So to this process, I know that there is an exception that happens 5 to 6 times, and this exception from me as an SME or a subject matter expert, I should definitely convey to the RPA design team or the business analyst that, you know what, every day though we are designed, our process is to get the file every day 10 a.m. Central, but there are scenarios when the stakeholder forgets, to send the file in time. So we need to send out a reminder email and wait until they respond. So that's what is called a checked exception. That means a scenario that is known which can disrupt my normal process flow. I'm aware of it, right? So those are the exceptions. What you call is this checked exception. What is unchecked exception? What is unchecked exception? The unchecked exceptions are something which, let's say, happens once in a while, or something that cannot be foreseen. Okay, so let's say this scenario that the file did not come never happened before. Suddenly, after the automation was developed, one fine day, let's say that's a once in a 5 years issue, that something on the other side would have broken. That's why they did not receive the file at 10 a.m. Central. So when we design a solution, we always need to have a backup in mind that if my input is not received, what should the bot do? Generally, we try to design it in such a way that in case if there is any disruption to the input to the bot, it should notify the concerned people. Correct? So that's what is called as unchecked exception. What is an error? Now let's say error could be because of any application issue. Correct? As I said, the bot is trying to log into the browser. Let's say the bot is trying to open Google Chrome and hit a specific URL, http://www something. The moment, let's say, the bot is trying to hit the URL, it is not opening up. So what could be the potential issue? Let's say the page itself is not responding. Let's say the server on which the application is hosted is down. There could be multiple issues, right? So those are certain errors that might happen because of my application dependence, right? It is not in my control. If let's say I'm integrating my bot with an organization's SAP system, I do not control the SAP. SAP is managed and developed by a different team. So they might have regular maintenance, they might have work because of, or any fine day SAP server might go down. Correct? So all these are errors that might happen because of an application issue. Now just imagine this. Here, what could be an exception? Let's say I have a process. After start, I need to attach a file into my email. Okay, and the process ends. Now, what if, let's say this is a resume, let's say, what if the file does not come or the file is not available? So here, if you see recover mode, that means can't attach, probably the notepad is not launched. So let's say there was a process where I need to open the notepad, I need to copy the text, save the notepad as .txt and attach it back to the email. What if, let's say one fine day, my system's notepad is not responding? That means there is a disruption to the process because of an application issue. So I will not be able to attach it. In that case, what should I say? If I should might be notifying the business stakeholder that there's a system problem. So the bot should automatically configured to set out notification emails. If my process is okay, my notepad is working, I resume it again and my process ends. Let's say first time when the bot attempted, the notepad did not open, it crashed for some reason. Second time when it attempted, it opened. I put the text, I save the file as .txt and I attach it back into my email and I'm sending. The bot is able to send it. So every time, there is an option. So what does the coders do? So any system exception that happens, we generally do one basic step called reattempt. Please try this once again. So we designed the bot to do a reattempt in case of any fatal error. And that's the best way that we can manage our automations. Yeah. All right. So now let's see, when we have understood that, we know the complex opportunity assessment, we know that we are doing a very good work on complexity analysis factor, we know we are good now on automation potentiality assessment, we also have understood that how do we derive exceptions, as it can be business or application. So all these, if done correctly, the investment that a company has done on RPA would be successful. And if it is successful, then what are the benefits that we are going to get? First of all, if my project is successful and the bot is deployed, the very first thing is a cost saving. So RPA ensures that you get a quick FTE reduction, because the moment the bot is deployed, there is a drastic reduction in human effort. I don't need those people again. Right? Productivity gain. Obviously, if I had 20 people doing my work for each day, an RPA bot can replace them, and let's say from 20 I can keep only 2 people to manage any exception, because the bot is able to handle remaining 18 people work. It is that fast with high precision and accuracy. Correct? So increase in the number of volumes defines, and that there is a TAT that has reduced, there's a turnaround time has decreased, and I have an average handling time which is increased. Correct? So I have a productivity gain. Next is business agility, enabling the business to act faster than before. Obviously, if I'm able to process more transactions on a daily basis, if I'm able to cover a lot of tasks on a daily basis, my business agility increases. I'm able to move fast, right? Quality improvement and error reduction, very, very important. Human could always do an error, correct? Even automation does an error. That's not, no one can say when automation cannot go wrong. Automations does not typically do error, because if it is programmed properly, it will work like that. But it has to face exceptions, as we have spoken about, right? But the overall aim is that if we are programming it and automating it, we will reduce the human error. Correct? So definitely there's an error reduction and there's an improvement in the quality. The more I reduce my error, correct, in the process, the more my quality of the work increases. That means error is inversely proportional to quality. If error reduces, quality will increase. If error increases, quality will reduce. Obviously, that's how the business processes are assessed. What could be the other? Very, very important, customer satisfaction. Let's say previously I had 20 people who would process 10,000 transactions per day. Now only one single robot is able to process 20,000 transactions per day. Imagine the difference I'm able to bring. right? The customer will definitely be happy, correct? And that's what automation does, right? Flexibility. Agility, we've already spoken. Flexibility. If there is an unexpected spike in volume, robots enable to scale up down as required. Now, what does that mean? Now, let's say I'm dealing with a financial project or a process. In finance process, what happens is in the beginning of the month, the transaction volumes are very high because everybody tries to close their book of accounts, correct? So at the first half, let's say first 7 days of the month, the transactions number of transactions spikes to, let's say, 20K plus. Again, in this last 7 days month end, okay, there is again a spike of the transactions, okay, where let's say it's crossing again 30K, right? So certain processes are transactional or volumetric based on, let's say, the month starting or the month end, and mostly financial projects are like that. And during the remaining 2 weeks in the month, in the middle period, let's say week 2 and week 3, okay, my volume are very minimal because financial activities or closing of finance account book of accounts generally happens in the month beginning and the month end, and they get very less transactional work in the mid of the month. Now if my 20,000 plus volume is increasing at the month beginning, I need to have sufficient staff, correct? So that those 20,000 volumes are handled. Now, in the middle of the month, let's say for 20,000, I have kept 20 people. But in the middle of the month, when my volume is, let's say, 5K, okay, I still have to keep this 20 people because I know that again at the month end, the transactional volume is going to increase to 30,000 plus, and I again need these 20 people to work, correct? So I need enough staffing irrespective of my process spiking and my process not spiking. And I cannot have a dependency that I will not keep people in the middle of the month. That's a different business strategy, but normally it does not happen. So if I have a bot which can do this numerous amount of volume, I need not bother about my staffing, how much FT people, how much resources I should align to my process at the beginning of the month, how many resources should I align to my process at the end of the month when there is a potential spike of volumes. I did not have to bother because for a bot, it does not matter whether your process is dealing with 20,000 transactions in the month end, in the month beginning 30,000, or in the middle of the month it is 5K. Bot will do the same work with same pace, same speed, same accuracy, and execute and get your work done. So that's what is called it as flexibility adjustment, which we cannot do with a human resource, right? Compliance, ability to comply. Now, obviously, when you do an automation, it is very, very important that you comply to the security guidelines. Now, what is compliance? Now, let's say at times you would have seen that when you log into your Gmail or any other account, there is a two-step authentication that needs to be done. Two-step authentication means either it will send an OTP to your registered phone number or email, which you need to enter for sign in, or there will be a captcha code, right? You need to enter a code that is written in zigzag, like 26EED, something like this will be written in zigzag. You need to type in back. Why it is done? It is to ensure that no adjacent script or any other web script can come and do the login attempt. That's why they keep a checkpoint for human validation. So generally what happens is it is not within the security and the compliance that you go and automate a process where your website has a captcha code or a two-step authentication to log in. That's not recommended. If you automate something like this in your company, your security and compliance team identifies that your team has automated something where there's a captcha code without proper approval, it can get escalated. So compliance and security is also very, very important. It's not that on this for the sake of automation we are going to do anything. So compliance is also very, very important. We need to understand that you either have pre-approval from your security and compliance team to do the captcha automation, or else you need to find an alternative to log into the server. Let's say from to the application, let's say from the backend using a server login. and pull the required information. So you need to look for alternatives, but at no cost you can do a breach of compliance. Not recommended at all. So RPA processes or automations that are done, that also ensures that we are pretty much security and IT security compliant. All right. So with this all benefits analysis, now we will have a quick deep dive into the process definition document PDD. Now, two things very, very important for an RPA business analyst is the documentation creation and understanding and arranging all the documents. Right. So PDD, what we call it as process definition document, outlines the business processes to be developed within the RPA project. Correct. Typically prepared by end user or business analyst, but trust me, it's the business analyst who creates the PDD. The document is then used by the developer as the basis from which the design automation solution is done. So based on whatever we decide or put down in the PDD, as I said in the previous sessions, that this PDD once done needs to be sent to the client for sign off, so that the client cannot come back tomorrow and say, you know what, I did not say this requirement, or what I said, you misunderstood me. I don't need this. What you have done is a crap. So how do you prove it? So signing off PDD is very, very important, that we lock the requirements and everybody is on the same page. The client, the business, the BA, the developer, everybody is on the same page. Correct. So that's why PDD plays a very, very important role in an RPA business analyst's role. All right. So how the PDD starts, we will do a quick deep dive about it. Okay. So if you see here, I've put a quick snip image. So, what is the purpose of the document? We need to give an introduction. We need to define the objective. So these are the phrases that are required. So the purpose of the PDD is to outline the business process chosen for automation using, let's say, UiPath technology or automation anywhere, anything. Correct. So this document would eventually describe the sequence of steps performed as a part of the business process, each and every step that will go up to keystroke level. Like even if I'm clicking a mouse in any space, that also needs to be captured with all the conditions and the rules of the process that are there prior to the automation, and how do we envision this automation to work. Correct. So this is the task of this entire process definition document. So now we will quickly try to see how this process definition document actually is and how it is being done. So process definition document, this is what we are using, is a standard uh, PDD that is designed by UiPath, but most of the attributes remain same. When you assess any RPA process, irrespective of it is in UiPath, it is in Automation Anywhere, or it is in Blue Prism. So first of all, the format happens like this. So you have a note where we mention the specific version controlling of the document, that what is the content, what is the purpose. Document history. Document history is to manage the editing part of it. Let's say, at times what happens, the PDD that you created is not right in your draft one. You sent it to the client says, no, this is wrong. Go ahead and rework. You create the version 2. Then you again sent it, it's again incorrect. Some changes are being suggested. You again do the work, it again goes for an approval. So all these editing modifications, and you are already aware what is the document history. So we manage the document history here. Okay. All right. Suppose that what we do, we keep the document approval flow. This is very, very important to understand, that who are the stakeholders to approve this document from client side and also from internal side. So if you see document prepared by business analyst, it should be the person's name, your organization or department you belong to, the RPA COE, your signature and date. Document approved by, that's head of accounting. Okay, let's say the head of accounting has to approve it. It's a financial and accounting project. The sign needs to come here. Document approved from the client side, or let's say the COE manager of the client, right? This is the client and they have to put their sign and document date. So all these things are required so that we effectively understand that who are all the people who was involved in approving this document. And this is the content, which is very, very simple. We'll not waste time on that. So introduction, I've already told you purpose of the document. Objective is very, very important. So what is the objective? We say that the process that has been selected for RPA is a part of the larger project. We have to name the process name here, that is conducted using this applications for this finance and accounting department. Okay, so certain things that you see in the blue color here that might change based on the project that you are working, based on the client that you are working, based on the applications that you are dealing with. Okay, so if you see here, the business objective and the benefits expected by the business process owner after the automation selected business process are, what are the objective, what would I achieve after this automation is done? First, reduce processing time by 80%. So it has been previously analyzed and understood that if I do this automation, my processing time, or what we call it as stat, turnaround time for completing each transaction, or let's say the total turnaround time would reduce by 80%. That's the objective why I'm doing this automation. Second, better monitoring of the overall activity by using logs. Yes, let's say this process is now manual, multiple documents are being pulled from different location, there is no centralized monitoring. But if we automate it, everything will come into one centralized repository and I can monitor each and everything what's happening in my process. So two objectives is for what we are working in this process. One is reducing the TAT to 80% and a centralized repository for my monitoring and consoling. Then we go into process key contact. This is very, very substantial with respect to every company. They try to at times mention that in case of any issue, who are the point of contacts that this project is associated to. So they put the team people's name, and anything, any issues, you can contact this people, and this can change time to time. Okay, so one very, very important step is minimum prerequisites for automation. What does that mean? That means to accomplish this automation, remember in previous sessions we spoke about opportunity assessment, prerequisite, aim, and approach. That means if I'm not given the documents, if I'm not given relevant organizational documents, process related documents, access to the application, I cannot start my work of evaluation. Right? So that's why we need to ensure, this PDD is nothing but you can think of it as a contract. When you go for a contract, you go for a business, you jot down everything, you get it signed. Similarly, what we do functionally, what we call it as PDD. So we have to mention that this automation would kickstart, but we have the minimum prerequisites. We need to have the PDD ready, the test data for the support of development. Yes, test data means the data using which I'm going to test my application or automation. User access and accounts creation, obviously. Now let's say this process needs login to SAP. Correct. Now definitely the developers or the robots access or login IDs needs to be created. Unless and until it is done, how can you log into the environment? Not possible. Correct. So that becomes one of the prerequisite. Credentials, yes. So if let's say I need to log into some virtual machine, if I need to log into a server, I would need credentials. So those IDs needs to be created for the developer and the robots who are going to be subsequently logging in for the work that needs to be done. Correct. So such kind of dependencies with other project on the same environment. If there are any specific environment access that is required, we need to get it done. Now, very, very important is to understand this step. I'm gonna star mark this as is process. Now what is as is? As is nothing but the current manual process, whatever is being done right now before any automation. That's what is called as is. That is how we are doing this current process manually. So these are certain parameters that you can read, and it is self-explanatory to understand that what is the process name, what is the process area, what is the process short description, that we know here this project for which this document was created. The purpose is that we are trying to create a security hash for each client-based application on their personal information. That was the process. These are the systems that are involved. This process is scheduled and has to run Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily. That's the requirement, that the current process is manually being done. Number of items processed or reference period, around 450 business transactions per day. What is the average handling time? 3 minutes. What is the peak period? Just now what I have spoken, that my transactions might go up and down. That's called peak period. So if you see, beginning of the month, usually from 20th to 30th of each month. So they're saying that at the beginning, or let's say at the end of the month, my peaks are high. So I need to adjust or develop the bot in such a way that those adjustments are done automatically. Transactions during peak period, it can reach 600. On a normal time, it is 450 per day, but at peak period, it can reach 600. So there's a 150 spike in the number of transactions per day. Total number of FTEs supporting, there's a manual resource, those are working today is around 3 to 4 people working. So I would get this benefit if I do this automation, right? What is the expected increase in volume in the next period? Do you see that, let's say, in next 6 months, do you think there can be an expected chance in increase in volume? They're saying yes. Right now it is 450 per day. Peak period is usually 600, but there is a potential chance that it can still go by 20% in the upcoming month. Let's say in next 6 months. Correct? So those are also being captured here. Level of exception rate, no expected exceptions here. They have noted what is the input, what is the output. So like this, each and everything in detail is getting captured. Here, if you see, we are mentioning what are the all applications that we are using. Acme System 1 is one application, sha1.com is another application. Both are web based. One is a task management, another is an ID generator. So we need to give each and every details. Now, what is this? This is a roadmap of my as is process. Okay, so that was the step. Now, this is my as is process. So, as is process diagram, it is very self explanatory, right? Now, this is a detailed as is process. So, whatever is the process, I need to have a detailed step or detailed flow about it. Now, what is the input data? So, where my input is going to come from, we're going to mention it. Now, what is the to be process? This is the to be process is nothing but the to the same manual or as is process, what is the solution that I'm giving? Then that is how the automation is going to work. Okay, so to be detailed process map that needs to be designed and developed by the technical team and given back to the business analyst. So you're not going to spend much of time there. Okay, parallel initiatives or overlap. So let's say what happens is that in certain processes there can be parallel activities that needs to go on. So if it is there, you need to make a mention here. If it is not, here it says any. Now what is in scope? We need to clearly mention what is in scope. So whatever is mentioned in step 1 to 10 is in scope. What is out of scope? It is saying handwritten form is out of scope. So that is one of the exceptions. So now let's say any of the form that is coming is digital, it comes within in scope. But anything that is handwritten is coming out of scope. So any handwritten form will not be processed by the bot. So that's a out of scope. What is the business exception handling? See here. Business process owners and analysts are expected to document the below business exceptions identified in the automation process. So they have here encountered previously encountered scenario. That means this is a known exception, what I was calling as checked exception. That means a scenario is defined with clear actions with workarounds for each case. I know that this would happen. And what is unknown exception? Any scenario that will abruptly happen which is not in my control. So what would be the known exception here that got defined? What could be the unknown exceptions? Those are got defined. So they're saying that for any interruption or any unknown exception, you need to send a notification email to this email address with the error message and screenshot attached. That's all the bot needs to do. Correct? If there are any errors in technology standpoint, what it should do? Again, errors can be, this is application error. The previous one was business exception. Now this is application exception. Similarly, if there are any known application exception, what it should do? If there are any unknown application exception, again, it should throw a notification email. And what are the reporting part? Is there any reporting that I need? Yes, I need might have a process logs, which is monthly, daily, transactional logs, error logs. All these are need to be defined if needed. Any other observation? Do you think there are any other thing that is not defined within this process? If it is there, you need to mention it. Additional sources of process documentation. Do you think that are there any additional sources? Sometimes what happens is along with this PDD, the client sends a video recording of the end-to-end process so that they can see visually that what exactly the manual steps are involving. That is also done. Standard operating procedure. At times they send the SOP of the specific process. They might send some business library or rules documentation or any other. So apart from this PDD, the other things that can help is a video recording or an SOP or any business rules or any other thing. All right. So with this, we would stop with understanding that, how a specific analysis happens for a specific process where I'm thinking that, I'm going to do a PDD documentation. All right. The second one is very another important documentation which is done, but it's not generally done by the business analysts. It is actually done by the technical team. What is it? We call it as SDD. That is it's a solution design document, or at times, it is also called as DSD. DSD is a term which is used at times by different companies uses a different term. So it is SDD, solution design document, or at times it is DSD in UiPath, or what we call it as technical design document or design specification document. That's what is DSD. Okay, so DSD or SDD is a document that is generally prepared by the developers to help the end users to understand that how this automation has been implemented. So it will have all the technical details. These are generally created to understand the RPA processes to be process. That whatever is my to be process map, I will create a detailed solution design document so that it's been understood by the business. So if you see here, this is a sample SDD document again, which, or you can call it as a DSD, whatever it is, development specification document. So here also we have a specific template, we have the contents, but here you will see most of the things are technical. So you have a documents overview, you have the automated master project details, you need to put what type of robot. So what are the technical details that I need to put? The project name. What is the type of robot? Is this robot a attended robot or an unattended robot? Attended means you need to invoke the robot by triggering something. Unattended means the bot can execute by itself. Is orchestrator involved? That means, do I have a centralized monitoring console in UiPath? Is this automation scalable? That means, let's say I have developed this solution for one project. Can I multiply the same solution and utilize the same robot for other processes? That's what is called as scalability. Runtime guide. So here you need to put the entire architectural design. Whatever is your to be design, that needs to come here. Apart from this, if you have any server or cloud architecture design, that also needs to come here, and that's why it needs to be prepared by the architect. List of packages. What are the list of packages that I'm using in my coding in UiPath, or let's say in Blue Prism, or let's say in Automation Anywhere? All these things comes into picture here. Master project runtime details. So to execute this project, robot that I have developed, what are the things I need to do? I need to know about the production environment details. I need to know what are the prerequisites that I need to run. Let's say for running a specific bot, I need to have an Excel file placed in this folder. That means that's a prerequisite. Unless and until this file is there, if I run the bot, it's going to give me an error. Right? The input file is not there. That means an exception is going to take place. So prerequisite needs to be defined. Input data, from where my bot is going to get the data. What is the expected output? When the bot should start? How long the bot should take to complete each of the step? What are the error handling? Is there any manual step that needs to be done in case there is any error? How to resume the process in case there is an error? All these details, what are the password policies? If the bot is using any password, what is the password criteria to reset the password? Where the credentials are getting stored? Are we storing it within the code, or we are storing it in a secure repository? What are the list of asset names we are using? Okay, all these details, technical details, comes into picture. And then, you know uh, environment wise, now let's say one project is deployed into two different environments. So first we need to fill the same for environment one, then we need to fill another further details for, let's say, the second environment. What are the environments used for development? What is the environment configuration? What is the environment prerequisite? Let's say environment means my process is utilizing SAP. Now for the automation, I need SAP installed in the system where the bot is going to run. If SAP is not there, that means the bot is going to fail. Right? So prerequisite of an environment is that my environment where the bot is running should have the SAP or the Oracle database installed. Correct? So all these configuration details goes into picture. Correct? And here, how many files are there in one automation? So generally in UiPath, there can be multiple workflow files that a developer creates, and the file names are generally stored with an exception called as .xaml. That's the extension of the files of the flows that are created in UiPath. And once all the coding is done, they publish this code and they bind all these codes together and make it one single application automation bot. Okay, so if developer is using multiple solution files or workflow files, it has to name each of them with the version controlling, correct? And if there are any other details, if there are any future improvements that is needed in the technical design, what are the debugging steps, if there is any error, how do I test it, is there any other remarks? Post UAT specification. This is nothing but once the user acceptance testing is done, how should I understand that the UAT is correct? So what is the average duration per transaction the bot is going to take? Recommend the number of bots that is required. So if there is this spike in volume, is it only one single bot that is going to work, or I need multiple bots that should be in place? Correct. What is the schedule to run this bot? So all these details comes into picture. And finally, you have a grocery where you define. So this is where you need to understand what is a master project, what is a project, what is a package, what is in workflow. This is kind of an acronyms list where everything is defined as a jargon that is used in this document. So technical design document is typically prepared by the solution architect or the developer at times, or even the implementation teams also need to fill the environment details. So it can be considered that this solution design document needs to be filled by the implementation engineer plus the solution architect. So it could be a combination of both. All right, so with this, we'll conclude today's session. And before we wrap up the assignment, I'm going to explain. So this assignment 7 is a little interesting one. So what you need to do is, the below is an image that we have placed, that this is the RPA process. So I have an Excel file, which is giving me an input. So the bot is going to read this Excel file, enter all the data into an SAP. Okay, and another SAP. So what generally happens here is, I have an Excel data that gets loaded into the SAP through an RPA bot. That's the manual step, correct? And from this SAP, I have an invoice that needs to be sent to the requester. Once the invoice is sent to the requester, the process is complete. I'm going to get a confirmation email. So I have an input, which is in Excel. The bot uploads the data back into SAP. This generates an invoice. The invoice needs to be sent to the requester. And if it is done, the requester is receiving the email of the invoice. Then a confirmation email needs to be sent to the business. So this is a simple process. So what this assignment is all about is, identify what could be the business exceptions that can happen. And also, I have SAP, I have Excel, I have, let's say, Outlook to send out an email, right? So what could be the potential application exceptions that can happen? Though application exception is not the task of BA, but just for improving our skill, so that we are not at least aware that what could be the possible application exceptions, right? To be an intelligent BA, correct? So you have to, I understand this diagram as I explained, and utilize this diagram to understand the exceptions that might occur. And you need to write down the exceptions, as I have already discussed, that there is one business exception, there is a application exception, there is a known exception, there is an unknown exception. So you need to write. So if you refer back to the PDD here, if we refer back to the PDD here, so whenever there was an application exception happened, all right, whenever there's an application exception that has happened, we have a known part, we have an unknown part, and then we have a step, correct? So if you see here, application exception and error handling, right? So you know the known error, you know the unknown error. Unknown is just an assumption that this might happen. It has never happened before, but there's a potentiality. So what are the known error exceptions, and what steps do you think the bot should do? If an Excel crashes, what should the bot do? And if there is any unknown exception, what should the bot do? Correct? So that's all is expected from this assignment 7.